Want to make a video on how to design a cheat sheet and why your equation sheet might not be working. And we have to cover concepts, diagrams, and equations, and these are the three main components of any kind of cheat sheet. Well, there's also some problems. One problem is disconnected concepts and topics. A lot of the times you might just be learning different topics in different categories that don't really make a lot of sense when you isolate them. And it's really good to be able to basically connect these things in certain ways. And if you're learning all these things, then none of them really talk to each other. And so you're putting them into separate folders in your brain. And when it comes time to do the exam, it's kind of just scattered. So a good cheat sheet is going to connect knowledge. Another problem is bad diagrams. A lot of the times, either there's no diagram, so people just start working on equations without a diagram, or they make a pretty bad diagram, like not drawn properly, or maybe it's too fancy or something. But there's no labels often, there's no physics. A good diagram is going to have the math pop out and instantly just the equations instantly appear. It's like completely obvious. You can see here on this diagram on the right how the force arrows just immediately pop out and like everything just makes a lot of sense here. So there's some equations here that just basically immediately show up. You can see how the radial motion is this the tension here, and then you're subtracting the um, the cosine component of this gravity here, and that's just going to be the radial direction of the acceleration. And you can see just how well this is designed. So a good diagram is going to reduce the load and encode equations within it. The third problem is foreign equations. Like a lot of textbooks, a lot of different systems, they have different notations for these equations. And so, even if you just copy that stuff down and stick that in your cheat sheet, it's not going to be very familiar, it's not going to be usable, and it's not going to make any sense. So you have to be able to convert all these things into equations that actually do make sense to you. That's like such simpler here that you could say, like, what is this dotted stuff? It doesn't really make a lot of sense unless you understand that it's actually just velocity. Okay, so just making sure that when you write stuff in your cheat sheet, that it's written in your notation, in your language, that's actually consistent with all the other things that you've been doing. So it's like you don't want to have notation on one page and the notation on another page is different because those will clash. So you want to make sure that the notations are consistent so that the theories work together. All right. So these are the three problems. And before we get into the cheat sheet strategy, let's sort of see this overview. We've got a warning, we have organization, we have updates, and we have the usage. So first, I'd like to get into the warning of making one of these cheat sheets. Because, well, the first thing is that, it might take a lot of time and effort, so you get to put a lot of brain work into this, right? The second thing is that a lot of people basically don't have these things, or if you make it like this big, important thing, like people will think you're kind of crazy or think that you're not very good at at what you're doing because you need the notes next to you. They think that you have to have everything in your brain and immediately just recall it and just do things without having any notes, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, of course, the third thing here is that you're going to have a lot of rapid growth. So, like, massive condensed knowledge that, like, it's kind of a rare experience. So, you might end up in a situation where, like, it's just hard to talk to people because they don't have as much knowledge. All right, so let's take a look at this warning here. Basically, yeah, it's going to take a lot of time and effort to do this. And, I'll show you kind of basically how many I've got here. You can see this doesn't it's not something that can be done just overnight. You could get started on one, but it's going to take a long time. So you have to put a lot of short-term effort into building this. Okay, but over time, long-term time, you can get more results. All right. The next thing is again the criticism that, well, the question really is, do we need a reference guide all the time, or should we be deriving things from scratch, just from first principles, from using our memory? Well, I think that we need a little bit of both. I think the derivation thing happens during practice, and the reference happens during execution. Um, and you think of it like as a musical instrument. If you're a musician, you need an instrument, and if you don't have your instrument, you can't play music. And so that's why you kind of really need one of these cheat sheets in order to play your instrument. Again, the rapid growth, you're going to have this condensed knowledge and this rare experience that a lot of other people probably won't go through. Even if they go through like the same courses, read the same textbook, they're not going to have it like imprinted into their brains because they didn't take the cheat sheet notes. So this is the warning that I have before we get into the main ideas. So let's talk about organization. Basically, we've got different layers that we can focus on. So there's a way to organize it based off of the classroom syllabus. You can basically, this is a curriculum that's been imposed from somebody else. Or you could go through the textbook, and this is kind of a step-by-step logical reasoning because they put things in order that makes a lot of sense and it sort of builds on previous concepts. But don't forget that we have minds, so we like to link things together and we like to make different connections. So my favorite way to try to get this to work is to build mind maps that basically connect in this type of mapping way, like a web. And of course, another great way to just kind of do something without being too worried about structure is to just get started. Just stick some equations down and then move them around later. So this might be a little bit messy and a little bit fragmented, but it'll really help to just get something going. So this is great for like just kind of making theories or something like that. So let's go through some examples because for the syllabus-based stuff, I had to make a couple of cheat sheets uh, based off of curriculums. I did this for like chemistry. I did this for these two things, electricity and magnetism. It is for most of the things I go through is based off of syllabuses because that's kind of what we need. So let's look at the electricity page. And this was designed essentially all through the syllabus. Okay, and that's why, at the beginning, like there's no like organization structure except for just kind of segment quadrants. So this quadrant right here was like the first quadrant that we had to study. Actually, I think it was just from here to here because this is Gauss's law. So this quadrant right here contains electric charge notes and electric force notes. And this was like the first week of class. And so I just put everything I needed on this little tiny square and everything else was blank at first. And then the next week, we started working on electric field. So I built this quadrant. I wrote this quadrant out in a couple of derivations over here about how to derive the electric field. Then in the third week, we went into Gauss's law. In the fourth week, we went to electric potential. And then, as you can see, this is building out into like six quadrants or more. And then we have, for example, the Kirchhoff loops and the resistance. And then we got into capacitors. And eventually, at the end, we were doing like charging and discharging. But basically, these are designed in quadrants, these little squares that I sort of organized. I was like, all right, I just want to make sure that this little piece contains enough so that I can go through the entire first section of this course um, just on a single page here. And of course, the course continued. We had to go through the magnetism portion as well. And this one was designed in a similar way, although I put this one sideways. But here we have like magnetic field stuff, and then we got into like Ampere's law right here, and then we did some self-inductance over here, and and then just a couple of basic notes like intensity and stuff. And the course was pretty much over at this point, but I was going into the different types of circuits that we could have, like LC, RC, RLC, and it does. And then over here we have the Maxwell equations sort of derived. So this was essentially the electromagnetism course, and it was designed kind of all around fitting to the syllabus and trying to make sure that the page or the two pages that I had was going to fit the entire course in one or two pages. That was really important to be able to organize this properly. Another way to do this is just by following a textbook logical structure. I did this with some of the earlier ones like calculus. So here's an interesting one that I did. This is all about calculus. And as you can see, in the first section, I just kind of wrote down all the different types of equations that exist. And this is only four sections because I think there was four chapters in the calculus book, so it was really easy to make this. In fact, a lot of people think that they need to know algebra first in order to do calculus. But I mean, you do algebra in your first week or your first section of calculus, so you know you can essentially skip everything and just start straight with calculus. As long as you do the first part of the review, pre-calculus review kind of, and you just kind of really know these things. I mean, what do you have to know? Linear equations, um, I don't know, these are pretty simple. Symmetries and polynomials, like sines and cosines, stretching, shifting, reflections, those kind of things. Pretty simple things. Trig identities and some inverses and maybe some exponentials and logs. And once you kind of get the exponentials and logs down, that's like pretty much all you really need. Sines, cosines, and exponentials is really all you need. So then we get into this stuff. We do the tangents, we do the derivatives, we do the integrals in this little section right here. Talk about limits and stuff. And then here we get into like just harder derivatives, essentially, just trig derivatives, all the different types of derivatives that you can do. That's really all that you're doing. In the first level of calculus is just a bunch of different derivatives. So this is actually the types of derivatives you can do. So we have like trig derivatives, logarithmic, exponential, implicit, the chain rule strategy, or we have the applications of why. Why are we doing derivatives? Well, it's because we can figure out related rates between two rates. We could do like critical numbers and finding like inflection points and stuff like that. And we could do tests to see what the limits are at infinity. We could do all sorts of crazy things with the derivatives. So this is kind of a just one, two, three, four sectioned thing, and all I got this was from like the calculus textbook, calculus one. I think it was from OpenStax. Same thing I think went through calculus two and calculus three. As you can see, more of these little quadrant based uh, cheat sheets, just like little quadrants. Boom. And the quadrants work great for both the syllabus and the textbooks, like a curriculum and the textbook, because you're just trying to section this off in a way so that once you get through the end of the book, I think this was just six sections, maybe five or six sections. Once you get through the end of the book or the end of the class, you've put it all on one page and you're not like overflowing. You're not writing too big. You just have to plan this out pretty well. And Calculus 3 was really intense. In fact, I think it was probably the best calculus class I took was Calculus 3 because we actually started to do real things. Like we started to use vectors and find dot products, and then we did cross products and all sorts of crazy stuff. Vector calculus here, we found different shapes and the different like equations that work with the shapes, the coordinate systems. Um, and yeah, we did like fields, like scalar fields and gradient fields and stuff, and this was intense, man. Like we really like derived the equation for the entire universe in 5 dimensions, which was pretty weird. But that's um that's definitely what we do in calculus 3. And yeah, all sorts of really great stuff. So that was cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next way to organize this is to use a mind map. Mind map is probably the most powerful way to do this, but it also takes a lot of planning. Um, so essentially, the idea is to use connections and color codes to be able to create a mind map or a web so that these things connect a little bit better than just quadrants. So let's look at physics 1, 1.1. All right, this is essentially, I put a lot of time after creating a cheat sheet once. I created this once, like just like pen and paper. And then I decided I needed to put it into the computer. This was essentially the first cheat sheet I'd ever made, was the physics mechanics one, because it was really freaking hard to do this class. And I needed a cheat sheet, and as I was doing it, I realized that I could organize it in a more web-like way. So the first the middle section here is all about rolling. And if you think about what rolling is, it requires all four components of mechanics. And the component up here at the top is essentially acceleration. Um, we have like accelerations and forces and stuff like that. On the left side, we have more like projectile motion, like straight linear motion. You can see the momentum going straight across. On the right side, I tried to organize this in terms of circular spinnings. And on the bottom side, I tried to organize this in terms of static energy, like statics, things that aren't moving and conservation laws. So these are like the four quadrants that make physics up. And of course, in the center, we are rolling, which includes acceleration, it includes linear momentum, it includes the angular momentum, and it includes a little bit of statics with this torque that can create uh, the force, acceleration force and stuff, the static friction and stuff. So this is another great way to organize this. And I created three versions. This is a version one. Let me see if I can open this with a better, open it with like photos or something. So when I do this, I can flip it between this first page and the second page and the third page. So here we have three levels of this map. This is level one, very basic, not that much equations. And so this is kind of like for physicists who've never really seen this before, and you don't want to be overwhelmed. But later you get more knowledge and you want a bigger cheat sheet with more stuff on it. And even later, you want a lot more stuff on it. So this is the ultimate version of this cheat sheet, which just has everything that I've been trying to do for basic mechanics. There's just a ton of stuff on here, and as you can see, the writing just gets more and more chaotic. But this is how we can remember everything that we've done. Just goes on this cheat sheet. This is like every possible equation I've done for mechanics. There's nothing on here. There's nothing that I've done that isn't on this cheat sheet, essentially, because everything just goes onto it. Okay, where am I? Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So yeah, this is great organization is to create a mind map. The next strategy is just doing it completely naturally, more scattered, and this is good for like making theories and stuff, or just getting started if you don't really know what you want to do. So let's take a look at the two that I'm making right now are going to be the electrodynamics one, and since we just looked at mechanics, I'm also doing a higher level mechanics. So after the basic algebraic mechanics, we have to go into like calculus-based mechanics, where we have to start doing this functional action, Hamilton's principle, Lagrangians, and all sorts of weird derivatives that don't make a lot of sense. But I didn't have like a lot of organization for this, so I just threw stuff down. And later on, we start organizing stuff. So I can move this, right? And this thing that says tangential motion here, like it's kind of just floating. Like some of these things are floating here. Like there's a holonomic, non-holonomic concept. It's just floating here. This magnetic force, it's kind of just floating here. But it's also next to the conservative force. So I try, and it's next to this like force idea. And this motion stuff is next to like the motion stuff. So it's like I try to organize things in terms of like what are related concepts and just shove them on a page somewhere. Like this is completely randomly stuck here. Coupled oscillators and degenerate modes. Like why is that even here? Um, just because when I was doing this type of equation stuff, all of a sudden this idea just popped out of some thin air, and I was like, all right, well, let's just put it there since this is what I was working on when that concept appeared. So, just sort of designing these worksheets kind of on the fly. Like, here's Fermat's principle, and here's like some coordinate transformations, and here's some diagrams. So, it's not great, but at least there's something. And so later, I try to organize it a little bit better, move things around and stuff. And we also had one for electrodynamics, which got really, really dense at the top here because we were doing some crazy vector calculus identities. And then later it got a little bit more reasonable. So we're doing like potentials over here, image charges, and then here we do some like vector integrals, and then we do like gradient divergence, the Laplace differential equations, and now we're doing like this section. This is kind of what I just wrote the other day, was this little piece right here. We're getting now to this section. We're doing polarization, displacement, and linear dielectrics. So this little corner here is going to be used up for those notes. But all of the notes that we're doing in these classes are going onto this, so that way I don't forget anything. I have a reference guide, and it's quite helpful. Oh yeah, and there's a crazy thing you can do too. You can make up your own theories and just organize things really well. So one great thing was the neural netverse. This is probably the coolest theory I've come up with. I made a lot of theories on my channel. This one made like the most sense because it's actually like real stuff. So we have like the neural netverse. What the heck is this? It's all the different like dimensions, like dimension one, dimension two, three, and four. And heck, what's the fifth dimension? And stuff like that. So I was trying to organize this in terms of what are the dimensions that pop out, what are the particles that that essentially pop out, because as you open a new dimension, you have new oscillations. Like you can oscillate in more dimensions, more directions, and these additional oscillation freedoms of oscillation gives new particles. So the photon only oscillates in one dimension. The W bosons oscillate in two dimensions. The quarks, the gluons that govern the quarks oscillate in three dimensions, and gravity works in four dimensions. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, this is all just kind of theories that I was sticking together and kind of scattered ideas here, left and right, but I'm trying to organize them as best as I can. And towards the end here, we kind of have all the equations that pop out of the one-dimensional equations, two-dimensional equations, three-dimensional equations, and the four-dimensional equations of gravity. This is just kind of interesting stuff, but all of it is theories and organized in this natural, scattered sort of way. Another great way to organize cheat sheets is to just use an AI guide. So he will list out a whole bunch of concepts and equations, and I did this for both engineering and geometry. So we'll take a look at, for example, let's go with geometry first because it's really cool. So we started this. This was not from a textbook. This was literally all from just asking a robot what I need to know about geometry and how to go from the basic fundamental geometries into start learning curvature, differential geometry, the metric tensor, different tensor fields, the covariant derivatives, general relativity, the Riemann curvature tensor Christoffel symbols, the Dirac operator, spinor field, Cartan geometry. All this stuff was made not from like reading, being in a course, not from reading a textbook, but only from asking the robot what I need to know, the specific equations that are important. And we even got into like the Hodge theory, where like we have these codifferentials and these exterior derivatives. This is madness. But very, very helpful for any kind of basic differential geometry because you need to know how to do the grad, the div, and the curl, and the Laplacian, and all that stuff, and kind of what the different forms are, like the O form, the 3 form, whatever. So, yeah, cool stuff that you can do, a different way to organize this, and there we go. So these are different types of cheat sheets that you can make, and the different organizational structures. Again, you could do it with the syllabus, the textbook, using a mind map method, doing it scattered naturally, or even just using the AI as a guide. But once we make these cheat sheets, we don't want to let them just sit there and rot. We need to update them. So you can update them in class, doing patch notes, taking notes. You could do the updates at home when you're doing homework. putting new concepts in, or you could do the updates during practice when you're doing exercise drills. And so taking a little laptop like this to class, and I actually have this little pen that allows me to write, so I can take notes on these cheat sheets in class. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. Depends on whether the class is kind of doing new information, new stuff, or whether we sort of already covered these things again, or just, how, whether I want to bring my entire laptop to school. You could also take notes on a piece of paper and then take the paper home and then update the sheet from your paper notes. But probably the most useful time to update this is during like homework, because that's when you're sort of given all these new concepts and you're always referencing the notes back and forth. And so this is when I do the most updates. I'm doing the homework, come up with something I don't know how to solve. I've never seen the equation before, and I have to put it into one of these files. And as you can see, there's a lot of files, a lot of different topics. So it's all organized very, very carefully. In fact, there's one, two, three. Then we have actually like five different ones for, four ones for chemistry. Chemistry one, two, one and two again. And yeah, so the idea is to try to shove this into the smallest amount of space possible. And that is in order to make sure the concepts all fit together. But probably the most important thing to do is exercise drills. And what I mean by exercise drills is not just doing homework, not just reading the textbook, not just going to classes, but coming up with your own drills to practice like things. So, for example, one interesting drill is to ask the robot or find some students who don't understand something. Like you could ask the robot to like pretend to be a student and ask you some silly question, like clarify this question for me because I don't understand this topic. And so that's called the student questions drill, where he's just going to pretend to be a student, ask the question, and then I answer the question in sort of a written form, sort of explaining it back to him. So that's something you could do. You could also just do tutoring, right? Like tutor some students, and that's kind of essentially the same idea. But student questions is a specific drill, and we could do some other things like jumpstart, for example, is an interesting drill where you take a problem, and for 2 or 3 minutes you just set a little timer, and then you work on the problem for 2 or 3 minutes just to get it started. Because starting a problem is really hard. So it's the jumpstart thing, and after 2 or 3 minutes you're done. And you do the next problem, 2 or 3 minutes, done. Next problem, 2 or 3 minutes. You're not going to finish the problem, but you're going to learn how to start the problems quickly. Another interesting drill is reverse engineer. That's a really cool one. So basically, you look at the answer of a problem, like the final answer, and then you try to reverse engineer a question, make a problem statement that would result in that answer. So these are some different drills that we can do. And I put a star here because I really want to emphasize that doing exercise drills are going to make progress extremely fast. Like so much more progress than anybody else because most people do not do these types of drills. This is like completely unique. Uh, Musicians do this, and people in sports do this, and you know, people who do games, like online gaming, like they do this too. People tend to do drills to improve specific skills. And you go to the gym and you do you do quads, you do like push-ups, you do lifts, you do cardio, you do specific drills. But when you go to school, you're not really given specific drills. You're given some homework, and that's about it. And those are your quote unquote drills. But that's not really drills. It's kind of more like the repertoire because as a musician, you have to learn songs. And when you learn songs, that's essentially like learning a problem, like a math problem. So you learn the song, and then you can do the problem over and over again, just like you're playing the song several times. So when you learn one problem, it's like you're learning one song. But learning songs is not the same as practicing like fretboard memory drills or speed building drills or those types of things. So it's completely different to do drills, exercise drills, than it is to do homework problems. Totally different thing. And in fact, we're probably going to have to make a whole video on different exercise drills and all sorts of concepts. So these are the updates that you should be doing to continually take more notes, update these cheat sheets, and use them properly. In fact, let's get into usage because this is the last section about what you're going to do with these cheat sheets. You can't just make them and then give up. You have to use them in certain ways. And obviously, you use them to solve problems. You use them on exams if you're allowed. Uh, you can use them to plan courses, and you can use them as handouts in your classes if you teach or if you do tutoring. So to solve problems, it's going to make the problems easier and faster because you have the reference guide. And remember the whole idea of the musician who has a visual keyboard in front of him. Like as you're typing on your keyboard for the computer, you have you have every possible letter that you can type in your keyboard or number or symbol is like right here in front of you. Same thing with the music. You have a piano, all the possible notes on the piano are in front of you. If they leave notes out, they're not accessible. Same on the guitar. In fact, sometimes they truncate the guitar necks and they make the guitar necks shorter. Um, for whatever reason, they cut it off at like 20 frets instead of doing the full 24 frets. So you lose some notes. You lose access to like all these notes. And so when you're trying to play on a shorter guitar neck, you can't play the high notes. So like it's kind of like having a guitar that's like missing frets and stuff. It's if you don't have the cheat sheet. You're trying to hold this all this information in your mind, and it's kind of like trying to like remember how scales sound in your mind without playing them ever, like on the guitar. Like how is this even possible? Like I don't understand how anyone can solve problems without having some sort of a cheat sheet. This is the critical, most important part is to have all the available tools right in front of you so you can look and see what tool you need. Oh, let's pull it out. So having your toolbox in your garage and you don't have tools in there. You just don't have any tools. How are you going to do anything? You keep them like, oh, yeah, I remember what a hammer sounds like, what a hammer feels like, but I don't have one. It's like, why? Okay, and another great way to use the cheat sheet is as a copy, like a copy machine. So you make the cheat sheet and you pull out like the specific equations you know you're going to cover on the next exam, and you just make copies of it. So you just keep writing the same equations. It's basically remembering these equations. Because, yeah, sometimes you're not even allowed to bring these cheat sheets onto the exam, so you do have to memorize everything. But at least the idea is you have a place where you've stored all the info and now you're just making copies. As you start making copies, you can refer less to the reference guide because you've made so many copies that they're kind of muscle memory now. But without sort of doing the cheat sheet copies drill, I don't see, the equations will only be instilled in how many times you use them during your problem. So I think this is a little bit better to instill equations into muscle memory is by making copies of the cheat sheet. Also, designing courses like all the videos that I've made and lecture topics, um, all the lectures that I've done were like literally I took the cheat sheet and I just wrote it out during the lecture slowly, like one of the compartments, one of the squares. Be like, all right, the video is going to be on this particular corner of the worksheet, and I just wrote out everything from the notes onto the whiteboard and basically explained it as I was writing it. So these are the kinds of ways that I was able to design courses. You have 6 compartments on your cheat sheet. That means you have 6 videos for your course. This is lecture stuff. It's dense information. So just consider that if you try to go through like a quadrant or the entire page, like that's usually like an entire week of lectures or an entire course if you go through the whole page at once. Like it's a whole course on one page. So it's very dense information. And here's the great thing about this is that if you're a teacher, what you could do is you can, or tutor, you can give the handout out. So you can give this to somebody on the first day, and then you'll never have to give them any more information because that one page has all the info for the entire course. You don't have to lecture them. You don't have to give them more shit to learn. You can just give them one page and then start working on problems and practice problems and practice problems and drilling and group work and all sorts of cool things so you can do more drills. The idea is to stop the time wasting of like learning because learning takes too much time. Instead, it's better to practice, to drill, and to do exercises. Then the learning becomes like instilled. It's not like adding new concepts, constantly new concepts, but more reinforcing the concepts that you've learned already. That is the key. So if you want to get good at physics, we have to do this stuff. We have to solve problems, make cheat sheet copies, think about designing courses in a way that isn't just constantly adding new information every week, new information, every lecture, new information. It's just not going to work. So instead, give all the information on the first day, and then after that, you just do review, review, practice, review, exercises, drills, exercise, review, drills, practice tests, quizzes, problems, everything. And from then on, it's just like drilling. And this is how you can get really, really good at physics fast. Okay? Uh, Math, chemistry, physics, science, whatever. If you start just constantly just doing the new information, new information, learning, 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 it's not going to help. It's not going to make you a better physicist. You're just going to get cluttered and forget everything. So this is the cheat sheet strategy, the blueprint of mastery, where again, you got to be warned that there are entry requirements. You have to put time, effort, high commitment. You might get criticized by other people who think you're kind of don't know what you're doing, or they think you don't need the cheat sheet because you should be memorizing things instead or deriving things from scratch. It could be thinking about rapid growth. This is really important. You're going to get massive growth out of this. And in fact, a lot of people, you won't be able to talk to them anymore because they won't know all this stuff. Like they'll be like, I don't know about all this. I've never learned it. So it kind of blocks you off. Uh, like you can't really discuss things with people who don't know the topics, right? Structural organization here. Again, you could use the syllabus, the textbook, the mind map system. You could do it completely naturally, or you could use an AI guide, but this is the core learning system that allows you to organize your thoughts better. Then we have to update the sheet, so you got to constantly use it, but update it as well. So, like during class, you got to update when you're doing homework. You got to update it when you're doing drills and those types of things. And for the usage, well, you want to use it to solve problems, you want to use it on exams, you want to use it to plan your courses, and you can use it as a handout to teach people. So this is absolutely amazing. This is a cheat sheet strategy, and it's completely changed my approach to like learning science. Without this, I would basically be pretty bad at everything. It'd be really hard to remember everything, and all my thoughts would be completely chaotic and disorganized, and I would forget like everything. But because I did these cheat sheets, I remember every single thing from the beginning of my college thing to the very end. Every single thing has been written on these notes. So I completely remember everything I learned, which is crazy because most people don't. So yeah, so this is again the cheat sheet strategy written out like this. Great method. And if you want to see my cheat sheets or download something for free, what you could do is head over to mtheory.gumroad.com, and I have a couple of different things you could download there. But the first thing is the free download of mechanical physics. So you can free download of the mechanical physics, a little bit of guides of physics and energy, and the simple one. And if you want some upgrades, we got the nuclear physics chapter, we got the quantum physics course, we got a study pack. But this is a complete guide. It's going to save you time and it's a really efficient review. So if you want something, then go ahead and check it out. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you learned something, and I hope that you implement this in your note taking and problem solving, and hopefully you start to really make these cheat sheets for yourself because that's how you get really, really good at remembering things. Remembering things is only part of it, but it's really important. Anyway, thank you so much, and I'll see you around.